This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Hannan.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, the catastrophic, murderous, genocidal campaign in Gaza continues, despite what we're hearing from President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. The so-called peace talks between Israel and Hamas have led nowhere, despite the comments coming from the White House with the meeting with Netanyahu and Trump. Things remain a disaster in Gaza. Civilian Palestinian men, women, and children are being murdered just standing in line to get food, Jamal. And according to recent reports, close to 15,000 children have been killed, 17,000 orphans. We have the most childhood amputees in the history of the world in one place, Jamal. It's catastrophic. We're also going to talk a little bit about a Palestinian American that was murdered by Israeli settlers. This is another big story, Jamal, because when Americans are killed, if they're not Palestinian, it makes breaking news. The State Department, it's big news, even from the White House. But a Palestinian American, an American citizen being murdered by Israeli settlers, silence, nothing. We'll hear what happens with that. In addition, Israel has arrested an Israeli journalist over a tweet and is opening a terrorism campaign investigation against a journalist for a tweet. We're going to be covering all those stories, Jamal, but in addition to that, we're going to watch a really compelling interview that you did with Professor of Political Sociology at the University of Bristol, Professor David Miller. Is going to talk about the British Parliament vote to ban a civil disobedience direct action protest group, Palestine Action, in the UK. He's going to talk about a private prosecution brought against him by the Campaign Against Antisemitism, which alleges that he used X to send messages of a menacing character. Things are bad here in the US, Jamal, but they're really bad in the UK too. And Professor Miller's going to break that down for us.
Yeah, and let me just correct that a little bit, because his former professor at the University of Bristol, just to be clear about that, and that's part of the case that was brought against him, and he won his case. There is an appeal process, and then he talks about a different case that's happening in the UK. Let's watch David Miller. There is an ever-increasing frenzy in the UK to muzzle criticism of Israel as protests continue to mount from all sides against Israel's genocide in Gaza and the British government's ongoing supply of surveillance and weapons in support of it. For the first time, Parliament voted to ban civil disobedience direct action protest group, Palestine Action, under the Terrorism Act, although the group does not advocate violence. Meanwhile, attacks have resumed against British sociologist and author David Miller, who in February 2024 was vindicated in a lawsuit against the University of Bristol after it fired him for criticizing Zionism. The court ruled that criticism of Zionism was both protected speech and worthy of respect in a democratic society. David Miller joins us again on Arab Talk to discuss the recent lawfare attack on him and the increasingly repressive tactics by the UK government and other power sources to shut down opponents of Israel's genocide and other human rights violations. He's a former professor of political sociology at the University of Bristol and the author of research and publications which focus on Islamophobia, racism, and propaganda. He's also the co-founder of the nonprofit Public Interest Investigations. Welcome back to Arab Talk, David.
Thank you for having me.
So let's begin with your case that established that criticism of Zionism was protected speech, was clearly decided early in 2024. But now there is a private prosecution launched against you by the Campaign Against Antisemitism, alleging that you used X, formerly known as Twitter, to send messages of a menacing character. What is going on?
Well, the Campaign Against Antisemitism is a cat's paw for the Zionist regime. It's been funded by leading Zionist family foundations and indeed by the Jewish National Fund, which is one of the four institutions of the national institutions which make up the Zionist movement. It's trying to shut down all sorts of criticism and dissent on Palestine. It's not only me who's been taken in a private prosecution. They're also, for example, taking a prosecution against the American comedian Reginald D. Hunter for saying rude things about Zionists. So that's a part of their broader strategy. I should explain what a private prosecution is. Now, normally in the UK, prosecutions are taken by the state, in England, the Crown Prosecution Service, in Scotland, the Procurator Fiscal. So these are state bodies who decide if something should be prosecuted. Now, in this case, the CAA has managed to get itself in the position of being a private prosecutor. So it has to act as if it is the state, with all the duties of candour and legitimacy, etc., which that is supposed to bring with it. And it's gone to the court and said that it wants a summons to bring me to court and the other people that they're bringing to court to prosecute me under the obscure Communications Act 2003 for sending menacing messages over an electronic system, in this case, X. So this is an attempt to try and stop me from doing my work. It's a badge of honor that they would attack me, because if I wasn't effective, they wouldn't be doing so. And it's an attempt to mire me in legal processes so that I can't spend most of my time, which is what I do, researching and exposing Zionism. But of course, it will fail. It will fail in two ways. One, it will not stop me from investigating Zionism, and indeed from investigating the CAA itself and fighting back against them. And two, it's likely that this case will either not come to court eventually or will be lost, because it's ridiculous to suggest that the tweets which I have sent, which relate to holding the Zionist movement accountable, are in some way menacing. They try and pretend that they are menacing in their court documentation. But we'll see how that plays out. But this is in the context where, let's remember, I'm also involved in a different case, which is the appeal by the University of Bristol against my victory from last year, which you mentioned, which will be heard in November. So I have court dates in October, November, and December this year for these two cases. Now, I should mention the appeal, because the appeal is very interesting, because it's they're claiming that the tribunal misinterpreted the relationship between underlying beliefs, which everyone accepts should be protected, and the manner of expression of those beliefs. And so that the university is maintaining that what I said wasn't a proper manifestation of my underlying beliefs. Now, of course, I think that's ridiculous, and I think the court will think that's ridiculous as well, in particular because in the last couple of months, there's been a bit of legal process in relation to that specific point of law, in relation to a Christian teacher called Christy Higgs, who took her school to court for an unjustified sacking, because she had gone on Facebook and she had criticized the school's policies on promoting, as she put it, promoting gender ideology and promoting the whole trans questions. So she lost her tribunal. She went to an appeal. The appeal referred it back to the tribunal on that point of law. She didn't accept that. She went to the Court of Appeal, and now she's absolutely smashed them at the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal has also denied the possibility of the school to go up to the Supreme Court. So that means that legal process is stopped. And that legal process, of course, enhances the precedence for me to argue in my case with the university that not only were my underlying beliefs protected, but that the manner of expression showed a close and direct nexus with the underlying beliefs, which, of course, as everyone knows, it did.
Well, that was actually my next question, but you kind of answered it, because, I was like wondering if there is a benchmark for determining the legitimacy of such claims. Does the court see these claims as frivolous and they are in violation of laws or whatever, that just they allow people who basically can hire a barrister or they have the money, or in that case, a university with deep pockets, to just take you to court to try to drain you basically financially?
Well, so in relation to the employment tribunal in the University of Bristol, the basis of saying that people's views and expression of those views should be protected is the Equality Act, one of the few progressive things which the Blair government brought in its terms of office, and it protects religious beliefs and also political beliefs and philosophies from being discriminated against. And so establishing that anti-Zionist views fall within the purview of views which are worthy of respect in a democratic society is very important. And of course, we will see pressure from the Zionists to try and get Zionism registered in the same kind of way. And I think, given what's happened in the last year and a half, that's likely to fail because, of course, Zionism is fundamentally a racist ideology, and it would be, it would be against the spirit of the law to recognize Zionism as protected. Now, in relation to the CAA, the Campaign Against Antisemitism, this is a kind of Orwellian or Kafkaesque process because, of course, we don't know who the Campaign Against Antisemitism is. It's a charity and it's a company, and charities and companies normally have to name their trustees or their directors, which are then put on a public register in the UK. But the CAA have applied for a dispensation from the Charity Commission and indeed from Companies House, which registers companies, not to have the names of their directors and trustees published. So we don't know who it is, effectively, that's instructing the solicitors in this case. Now, that's, as far as I understand it, quite an unusual situation. I don't believe there's ever been a situation like this before. Now, of course, the CAA has 2 employees listed on its website, and it says it's not going to confirm or deny whether these employees are also directors. But of course, we have to have clarity on that because we can't even tell who the prosecutor is, and that's a real, that's Kafka's The Trial writ large. So we will be, of course, challenging that, and there will be many other challenges which we will make to this summons, calling for it to be set aside. But even if it comes to trial, I'm confident that we will be able to push back against their claims.
Do you think that your lawsuit and others are part of a wave of growing panic amongst Israel supporters in the UK and elsewhere to shut down swelling protests that demand it stop supporting Israel in its ongoing genocide and war crimes against Palestinians?
Well, yes, it's a growing wave. Yes, they are panicked because they starting to see bricks falling out of the wall, which has prohibited people from making full-throated criticism of Zionism. I mean, before the genocide started, it was fairly widely recognized on the left, even, that making comparisons of the Zionists with the Nazis was a bad thing, and might offend Jews, or maybe it was a little bit anti-Semitic even. But now that dam is broken, everyone can see that this is a genocide. Everyone can see that there has been no worse genocide in living memory, and everyone sees the dead babies. I don't think that the people in charge really understand that. Everyone's seen the dead babies, and it's just impossible to put back in the box this idea that the IDF is the most moral army in the world, that it's the only democracy in the Middle East, and all that kind of stuff. So the Zionists are becoming more and more desperate and more determined to try and use the law to shut down dissent, whether it's in the UK or in Australia or in the US or in many other places. Actually, they, of course, operate all over the world. There are Zionist outposts, for example, through the World Jewish Congress, which has activity in over 100 countries, where they are on a daily basis pushing back against the possibility of people standing up for the liberation of Palestine.
For the first time ever, Parliament voted to proscribe a civil disobedience direct action protest group, which is Palestine Action, under the Terrorism Act of 2000. In 2003, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, then a human rights barrister, defended protesters who broke into the Royal Air Force in Fairford to stop US bombers heading to Iraq. What changed?
Well, what changed was he became Prime Minister, and he was in receipt of substantial support from the Zionist movement, as everybody knows, including the secret donations, which he disclosed not timorously at the last minute before he became the leader. So he is in the Zionist pocket. Almost all of the cabinet are in the Zionist pocket in reception of significant sums of money. The Home Secretary, who has banned Palestine Action, received over £300,000 in the last 2 years alone from 2 large Zionist donors, including an organization which was set up by Trevor Chin, who is perhaps the most important Zionist leader in the country and has actually been appointed on occasions as a member of staff of the Labour Party in situations where the Israel lobby has come to lobby the party, and he's there representing the Labour Party when he, of course, is effectively the head of the Israel lobby in the UK. So it's a ridiculous position. So that's what's changed. But the other thing that's changed, of course, is that the state wouldn't have done this in 2003. The state didn't do it in 2003. The idea that you can prescribe under the terrorism legislation a non-violent civil disobedience organization is ridiculous, and everyone knows it's ridiculous. Everyone knows that Palestine Action is not a terrorist organization, and people will continue to say that. In fact, people have been continuing to say things like "I stand with Palestine Action" or "We are all Palestine Action" or "I support Palestine Action" all over the country. There've been over 120 arrests so far. As far as I understand, no charges yet. But there will be more and more people who do this, and that's going to be impossible for the state to deal with, and probably it will begin to collapse. But it's not only the question of these politicians being in the pocket of the lobby and of the Zionist movement. It's a wider question. So we know from freedom of information requests that the Zionist regime itself has been in dialogue with the prosecutor's office, the Attorney General's office, and others in the British government to try and get them to take measures against Palestine Action. We know that's happened. We also know that there was a campaign launched just at the beginning of June by an organization called We Believe in Israel, one of the main Israel lobby groups in the country, to ban Palestine Action. And of course, that's what's been taken up in the prescription order which the Home Secretary has made, which of course partially echoed some of the language in that report. And that organization, We Believe in Israel, used to be led by Luke Akehurst, perhaps the most famous non-Jewish Zionist in the country, who's now an MP, parachuted into a safe seat in the northeast of England. And it's now led by a woman called Catherine Perez Shakdam, who is an alleged Israeli spy who converted to Islam when she was younger. She infiltrated both Yemen and Iran, allegedly was involved in sending intelligence back to Israeli intelligence organizations to target IRGC leaders back in the early 2020s. And she then, they were then suspicious of her, and she left and she confessed all to the Times of Israel. She's still clearly an operative for the regime. And that's who was behind this process of trying to ban Palestine Action, which is, as I said, is absolutely ridiculous.
That's really interesting. There has been an outcry from such organizations as Amnesty International stating that this is a dangerous judicial overreach as a result of the vote. Former Labour MP Zara Sultana and independent MP Jeremy Corbyn have declared that they are starting a new political party. Will this change things in the parliament?
It might have some impact, but whether this party will get off the ground is something which remains to be seen. The idea that 6 years after Corbyn was removed as head of the Labour Party, that now would be the time, as opposed to 6 years or 5 years or 4 years ago, is slightly curious. Now, the difficulty, of course, is that there's been very little learning by Corbyn, it seems, or his advisors about the circumstances of their defeat before. They were defeated by the Zionists, and they were defeated by the Zionists in part because Zionist ideas infiltrated into the very centre of the Corbyn-led leadership office of the Labour Party at the time, such that it became the case that once Corbyn got hold of the administrative apparatus of the Labour Party with the appointment of his own General Secretary, Jenny Formby, then they appointed this committee to deal with anti-Semitism complaints, well, almost all fabricated by the Zionist movement. And this committee had inculcated and come to believe in Zionist assumptions that there was widespread anti-Semitism, that criticizing Zionism or Israel in some key ways could be anti-Semitic. And that meant that there was a huge increase in the people who were expelled from the party for alleged anti-Semitism, when there was actually no problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And if anything, if there was any anti-Semitism, it was a much lower level than in the general society. It was transparently a Zionist ploy. But what Corbyn did was he adopted a strategy on advice from his advisors of apologise and move on. Apologise for anti-Semitism. And of course, in the end, that meant that he had to stab in the back many of his most important and closest supporters. Ken Livingstone, that icon of British anti-racist history, Chris Williamson, Jackie Walker, Tony Greenstein, Mark Wadsworth, and many, many others who were stabbed in the back, thrown under the bus. And when it came to the moment, there was nobody else left to support Corbyn. Like some people are saying, well, he's learnt the lesson now, and he's seen the genocide, and he might have had a wishy-washy position on the two-state solution, etc., before, but now he's an anti-Zionist. Well, I don't see any evidence of any lessons being learned, and in particular, I would say that the evidence against that proposition is that he has the same advisors who advised them at the time to do these things, and these advisors are Zionists. James Schneider, for example, Ollie de Rose, Justin Schlossberg. These are people who are Zionists and who will advise him not to take an anti-Zionist position. I don't believe he has, since he became the leader of the party, taken any anti-Zionist positions. He used to be more obviously an anti-Zionist. He used to talk about the right to return, which of course would collapse the Jewish state in the Levant. But he doesn't do that anymore. If you look at his Twitter account, not a single mention of the Z word at all. There used to be a thing, but they've deleted those ones are there. So I'm skeptical about the value of this, and in particular, the other reason I'm skeptical is because there's been no attempt to work with other left forces. Now there is another new left-wing party. There's the Workers' Party of Great Britain, and you might say things for and against it, but it does represent a section of the left in the country, and there are other left factions as well who could be reached out to. But there's been none of that, and that's because, of course, I think the strategy is the same: is that you don't get into an anti-Zionist position. And probably, I mean, we don't know this yet; it hasn't happened, but probably they will still support the two-state solution, which, in my view, is simply a Zionist position. It allows the Jewish state to continue to exist in the Levant, albeit with a kind of Bantustan Palestinian state next door to it, in the vision of the two-state solution proponents. And of course, what will happen then is that the Zionists will build up their strength again, should a two-state solution be imposed, in order that they can continue the genocide. They will not stop until they have genocided all of the Palestinian people and removed them, because that is what Zionism is. It's inherently racist, inherently colonial, and indeed inherently genocidal. And so that's the only way to peace, and to what the advocates of two-state solution say they want, is to eradicate and dismantle the Zionist entity, the Zionist colony, and to remove it from Levant. There's no other way to have peace.
In the UK, cancel culture has been initiated against artists who criticize Israel, such as Kneecap and others. Recently, there is the case of punk rap group Bob Dylan, whose performance at Glastonbury Music Festival garnered a lot of media attention. Meanwhile, Israel continues to massacre and starve people in Gaza on a daily basis. Shouldn't that be the topic of conversation instead?
Well, yes, of course it should, but it's not. I mean, what we see with this attempt to censor Kneecap and the BBC refusing to live stream them, and then making the mistaken decision to live stream Bob Dylan instead, who went one better and coined a new phrase which travelled around the world within one day, which of course is death to the IDF. And there's been a huge controversy about that, and they've been cancelled. Bob Dylan have been cancelled from various other places. Kneecap have been cancelled, but their popularity has increased as a result of this cancellation process. But the cancellation process is not just something which is separate to the genocide. The cancellation process is done specifically by genocidal Zionist groups, including, of course, yes, outside the music industry, the UK Lawyers for Israel, for example, or the Campaign Against Antisemitism we mentioned, but also inside the music industry. So the people who tried to cancel Kneecap from Glastonbury, I got a leaked email which 35 of them sent to Glastonbury, which they failed to get Kneecap cancelled. And it was all leading figures from the music industry. And the same with Bob Dylan. In the last couple of days, they've been cancelled from a festival in Manchester in the north of England. And the venue was what cancelled them. And the venue is owned by a company called Live Nation, which claims to be the biggest live entertainment company in the world, based in Beverly Hills, and which is involved in working closely with a company in Israel to take artists to breach the boycott, to sanctions bust, and take large artists to play in Israel. And of course, in doing that, it openly admits that it collaborates with an organization called Creative Community for Peace, which is a Zionist front group, which is also behind the email to Glastonbury, and which is an alternative name for a Zionist group called Stand With Us, which you might be familiar with, which is taking money directly from the Israeli government and which is used by the Israeli government, and they openly say this, as a means of leverage. So it's an indication of the way in which Zionists are infiltrated throughout the society. So when people talk about the Israel lobby, I often worry that they don't think of this as any more than AIPAC contributions to congressmen or whatever. But the lobby and the moves, that Zionist movement around it, are much, much more significant than that. It's not just the lobby groups. It's not just the radicalization groups which radicalize young Jews. It's also the fact that throughout the society, especially in the media and the music industry, there are highly placed Zionists who, when the moment comes, when they get a tap on the shoulder for to do the right thing, will, in almost all cases, it appears, do the right thing, meaning that they will try and cancel pro-Palestinian voices. And that's why, of course, also Bob Vylan was dropped by its talent agency, the United Talent Agency, which is stuffed with Zionists, just like the Live Nation organization is stuffed with Zionists, and there are many other entertainment bodies which book acts, which manage acts, which sign onto record labels, who are also dominated by Zionists. And that's like a really curious thing, which I think prior to the genocide, many of us hadn't realized.
Well, I mean, from what I've been reading and seeing, and I actually looked at their website, and now they're, like, in the case of Bob Vylan, they're saying that they have their own production company and so forth. But isn't this failing to silence artists? I mean, the more you do of this, actually bring them more into the spotlight. I mean, millions and millions, as you said, more people now want to see what they've said or hear what they've said and so forth. And it's kind of might just work the opposite way.
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, of course, in terms of popularity and conceptions and consciousness, that's true, I think. So globally, it's the case. Even in those countries which are the most supportive of the Zionist colony, public opinion is radically turned in the US and Germany and the UK, which are the three most important countries for directly supporting and involving themselves with the genocide. But there's another sense in which this is a battle. So Zionism will not be ended by crosswords and demonstrations. They don't care when we demonstrate. Doesn't matter how many of us there are to demonstrate. What they care about, and this is why they've banned Palestine Action, what they care about is when we interfere with their ability to commit genocide. And of course, Palestine Action's efforts to shut down Israeli arms firms in the UK, in particular Elbit, but also others, is interfering with their ability to kill children, and they don't want that. So that the key thing really is when the movement and the consciousness turns to material action. So of course it has to mean smashing up arms firms, of course, but it also has to mean de-Zionizing all of the public institutions, meaning governmental institutions, and in private institutions, meaning corporations and the like, which have a kind of Zionist death grip at the top of them. And that's a much more difficult and long-term process, but we have to take material action to do that. These firms have to be shut down, or these people have to be removed, they have to be de-Zionized. And that's a big convulsion in our societies. And when that starts to happen, then the genocide will stop.
I want to pivot to Islamophobia, which is really your specialty, aside from everything else. Islamophobes in the US have been coming out of the woodwork since Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary for mayor in New York City, prompting attacks and Islamophobic commentary ranging from politicians to special interest groups and stretching all the way from New York to Silicon Valley. The current mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is a Muslim of Pakistani descent. This is a two-part question. Did he face similar Islamophobic attacks due to his faith and his ethnicity? And in your opinion, what are the similarities and differences between the two? Mamdani and Khan, and also the reaction if any, in London and New York City?
Okay, so that's a complicated question. So, yes, of course, Sadiq Khan has faced such Islamophobic attacks from the Zionists, obviously, and from the Zionist-aligned people on the far right. But he has always been a Zionist, and he is extremely close to the Zionist movement. And he doesn't speak out for Palestine, never has. And so that's an issue. So even although he is very pro-Zionist, the Zionists will still attack him, and that's like again the same with Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's position on the two-state solution is, I say, a Zionist position. And people say to me, "Well, how can he be a Zionist when the Zionists are attacking him?" Well, it doesn't stop them. They will attack anybody if they can push them a bit further. They'll attack Elon Musk, who's a big supporter. They'll attack anybody. For example, attacking the BBC for the Bob Villain thing. As if the BBC is not run tightly by people at the top who are Zionists. I mean, it's extraordinary that the most senior committee in the BBC has 5 people on it, 2 or 3, depending on when it is, are Zionists. They're convinced Zionists, and you're never going to get proper coverage, regardless of what happens further down when you have an organization like that. But nevertheless, the Zionists are continuing to push the BBC to go further and further. So that's the position, and that the same is true of Mamdani. Mamdani has said things about Palestine which are much better than Sadiq Khan. It's not clear to me he's an anti-Zionist, though. However, and of course, we know about his father and his father's excellent work on good Muslim, bad Muslim, etc., which of course everyone should be reading. But he is of course being attacked by elements of the Zionists, and he looks like he's got a popular platform there. But I mean, obviously, it's difficult to get an anti-Zionist elected anywhere in the US, the UK, Germany, France. But nevertheless, we are in a position where he is being attacked, and probably people will rally around him, and he'll get support from quite a lot of Jews in New York, probably, one would assume. But I think that there are weaknesses in his platform, in particular on the Islamic Republic of Iran, on the resistance, and on whether he's an anti-Zionist or not. I don't think he is.
And do you think, do you think people in London are more accepting? Because aside from that, we talk outside Zionism, people just are against him because he happens to be Southeast Asian and brown and what have you. But it seems that in England, that's something acceptable to have the mayor of the capital to be non-white.
Yeah, I mean, look, London is a bit of a melting pot, isn't it? I mean, I hate to use that phrase, but the idea of having a Muslim mayor is not a big deal. Wasn't really a big deal. It was the Tories tried to weaponize it and tried to suggest that one of the Tory candidates, Zach Goldsmith, tried to make Islamophobic smears and slurs, and that didn't work. So I'm not sure that really that the people of New York are fazed by having a Muslim as mayor either. I think that it's more that the fringes want to make it into an issue when it's not really. I mean, but also the other thing to mention here is the fact that in the last year and a half, as a result of the genocide and alongside it, the whole question of immigration, this general visibility of virulent Islamophobia in the public sphere has increased in this country as well as in the US. So I think that's part of it is the historical period that we're in, and so that many of the kind of Islamophobic ideas that were kind of really confined to the far right now have started to become a little bit more popular. The idea of Muslims taking over, the white genocide thesis, all of that stuff, which comes, of course, largely from Zionists on the right, including the thesis of Eurabia, which is a key idea that the Arabs and therefore the Muslims are taking over Europe, which is popularized by a woman called Bat Yor. That's her pen name, Daughter of the Nile. And she, of course, is a former Mossad agent. So we see what's going on here. This is a Zionist Islamophobia being pushed in new directions, and we should be calling that out and trying to understand it. Of course, in the US, you have a much more well-organized Islamophobia network than we do in the UK. We have a quite well-organized one. So all of those organizations that we already know about, the Middle East Forum and Frank Gaffney's Law, all of those organizations, of course, are still pumping out the Islamophobic rot.
pro-Israel groups like to link, criticism of Israel to an uptick in anti-Semitism. This is now the narrative. And anti-Semitism does exist. In Europe, in the United States, everywhere. But is that because of what's going on in Gaza? That's what they're trying to link that. Also, you specialize in Islamophobia. Has there been an increase in hateful rhetoric towards Muslims? Is it condemned in the same manner as anti-Semitism on the media and by politicians?
Well, of course it's not. You said that there is anti-Semitism. I doubt that there is really any anti-Semitism in the society, either in the UK or the US, beyond small pockets of the traditional far right. But most of the far right was taken over by the Zionists in 2009, 2010, by US Zionist Islamophobic organizations, including organizations which have come over to the UK and indeed to the whole of Europe, and which offered money to the far right to abandon Judeophobia and to embrace Islamophobia. And most sections of the far right took that money and became effectively Zionist mouthpieces. The English Defence League is one of them. They called themselves the Counter-Jihad Europa movement. So is there any anti-Semitism in this country? I doubt there is, in the sense of racism against the Jews as Jews. Now, is there criticism of Israel? Of course there is. Is any of that anti-Semitic? I doubt any of it is. And what they have been trying to do is to suggest that there are some criticisms of Zionism or some criticisms of Israel which are anti-Semitic, which cross the line, or which make use of tropes against the Jews, or something like that. And that of course is expressed in the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition, which is of course a definition which was invented by the regime itself and its various assets abroad, including in the US, the AGC, for example, in the UK, the CST, and other organizations. This is an instrument of Zionist foreign policy. So it says that if you criticize Israel as a racist endeavor, that's anti-Semitic. No, it's not. So there was anti-Semitism in this country, and there was anti-Semitism obviously in Germany and other places, but since the 1950s, hardly at all. And to try and link that or compare that to Islamophobia is a mistake. And also, what they want to do is they want to say that traditional anti-Semitism, meaning racism against the Jews as Jews, which saw the Jews as inferior, they want to say that that's not really a problem anymore. They want to say that instead there's a new anti-Semitism, and that's mainly practiced by the left and by Muslims. Now, this is a complete fantasy, but it's one which is taken seriously in the policy capitals of the Western world. And so what you see instead is, of course, a rise in Islamophobia, which I would define as a form of racism against Muslims, not just of Muslimness, but against Muslims and against Islam. And I think that is, of course, a form of racism which is not, it hasn't started to exist since 9/11, but it has become much more important since 9/11, and indeed since around about 1979, 1980, when many of the ideas about Islam were coined, such as the idea of Islamism or the idea of Islamic terrorism. These were coined in particular and promoted by the Zionists, including in particular their first big showing was at a conference in DC in 1984, organized by the Jonathan Institute, named after, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu's brother, who was killed in the Entebbe raid. So it was Netanyahu himself who started to promote this idea of Islamic terrorism, of Islamism, as if all Muslims who took part in political action were the same. So Daesh and Hamas were the same. They were the same as Hezbollah and the Islamic Republic. Now, this is obviously nonsense because, of course, there are many differences between them. And it's also nonsense, the idea that Muslims who want to use their faith as a guide to politics are somehow almost already proto-terrorists. And so that's where Islamophobia comes from. It doesn't only come from the Zionists, but it comes in large part from the Zionists, with, as I've shown in my analysis, a little bit of support from the CIA.
Well, I understand all of this, but some might take issue that saying that the numbers of anti-Semitic cases are low. Otherwise, you dispute all the findings and stats provided by different organizations. Aren't there people?
perfectly happy to do that. I can tell you, I can give you chapter and verse on what's wrong.
Aren't there people who are just inherently anti-Semitic, just like they are inherently Islamophobic or racist towards black and brown people?
I don't believe so. I believe that racism is always state-directed. It may find its echo on the streets, but it's always state-directed. That's why we have Islamophobia now, and instead of in the 1960s. That's why we had in the 1960s anti-black racism in this country. In the 70s, we had anti-Irish racism, and that's because this is state-directed by state foreign policy and domestic policy prescriptions. The reason we have Islamophobia specifically in this historical period is for those particular historical reasons, and it finds its echo, yes, on the streets. But there's no intrinsic racism in people's heads. It's a constructed process, and it has to be constructed by states by putting in place the apparatus of repression which causes the racism. In fact, is the racism. I mean, the main racism which Muslims face in this country on a daily basis is being stopped and searched by the police at ports when they come into the country or leave the country, or railway stations, in harbours, in airports. That's a daily onslaught against Muslims. Muslims are overwhelmingly the ones who are stopped and searched and questioned under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act, for example, and that's a state-directed project. And the Jews do not suffer that at all. There is no state-directed racism against the Jews in this country. In fact, Jews in this country, in America, in other places, are advantaged economically, the most advantaged ethnic demographic in both of those countries.
David Miller, as always, thank you for sharing your views with us on Arab Talk.
Thank you.
That's the voice and the face of former Professor of Political Sociology at the University of Bristol, David Miller, talking about the kind of upheaval and the attacks against pro-Palestine activism in the UK and attacks on academic freedom. Jamal, things are very bad globally. We know especially what's happening here in the States, attacks on, students, faculty, and solidarity activists. But it seems like things are equally bad in the UK.
Well, there are campaigns to muzzle, of course, pro-Palestinian activists in the United States, in the UK, in Germany, and other places, and that interview focused on what's happening in the UK. Moving on to our topics for the day, Jess, the news, but I don't think this is making headline news in the United States, but a Palestinian American has been killed by Israeli settlers in the West Bank. His name is Saifullah Kamel Musallat. He was beaten to death by Israeli settlers. He's 20-year-old citizen, American citizen from Tampa, Florida. And he was killed in the town of Sinjil, north of Ramallah. Along with him, a second man, Muhammad al-Shalabi, 23-year-old, was shot to death during the attack. And Musallat was born and grew up in Port Charlotte, Florida. His parents, who happened to be there, said that he was left to bleed to death because the IDF was preventing ambulances from reaching him. A typical story that we've heard many, many times when it comes to Palestinian lives. I mean, this guy wasn't shot. He was beaten. He was like lying on the floor, bleeding to death. This is not the first time. This year, 3 other Palestinian Americans, all teenagers, have been killed in the West Bank since the start of the war, Israel-Gaza war. We know the famous story of Shireen Abu Akleh. Up till today, we haven't heard anything about what the United States is going to do about her murder. Nothing, so that investigation. And the only thing that we have now on record, Jess, is that a statement, I think, from the State Department. The State Department said it was aware of reports of a U.S. citizen's deaths in the West Bank, but did not make a comment. The embassy of the UK in Jerusalem, the UK condemned his killing, but we haven't heard any condemnation from the US embassy. I could be wrong.
I don't
I
think we
could be
will.
wrong. It might have happened later on, but I haven't heard that. But I know the first condemnation came from the UK and other countries, but nevertheless, we didn't hear anything.
Well, this gets to the classic asymmetry of what it means to be an American citizen. If you're an American citizen and you're detained, arrested, or killed, unfortunately or sadly, in another country, there's outrage and an immediate messaging from the State Department and perhaps even the White House condemning the killing of an American citizen. And here we go, Jamal, with the Palestine exception. Here we have an American citizen yet again murdered by Israeli settlers and allowed to bleed to death and not provided the medical attention that he would need, so that he bled to death, literally bled to death, an American citizen. And we're seeing that the Israeli settlers and the Israeli government continue to get away literally with murder, whether it's Shireen Abu Akleh, whether it's these American citizens who are in Gaza, West Bank, or East Jerusalem. They continue to be attacked and murdered by Israelis, illegal settlers, or even the military. And there's no accountability, Jamal. So tragically and sadly, this is not a news story, but it's happening and it continues to happen. Here we go with anti-Palestinian racism in the United States. I guess there's different levels of American citizenship now.
Well, I should also mention that the 3 Palestinian American teenagers who were killed, their cases remain unresolved, and their families say that they've since been harassed by Israeli authorities.
Right.
So, I don't know, different ethnicities, different blood, different religion, different colors, and so forth, that the United States will act or react upon the death of an American citizen outside the United States. But we definitely see the difference in reaction. We know the difference also for the Israeli Americans who were killed, be it during on October 7th or otherwise. It's a total different reaction, total different coverage by the media, and total different condemnation.
There's no condemnation, Jamal. Let's be clear about it. Israelis, settlers, the military, the government allows Palestinian Americans to be murdered without accountability. And this unfortunately looks like it's going to continue, and it's putting everybody in danger. I mean, we know that every single Palestinian in Gaza is in mortal danger every single day, but we haven't given as much attention to the mortal danger that Palestinians in Jerusalem and in the West Bank face every single day. And this is yet another example, Jamal, which we will cover in the future, of course.
And briefly talking about Gaza, Jess, sadly, Palestinian children are making records in amputations in such a short period of time, record in children made orphans, over 17,000 orphans, most child amputees in modern history, and also several of these amputees who have been brought to the West, many of them, just more actually of them, I should say, are being denied entry to the United States, to Europe, or facing delays, very few of them. And I'm thankful for the organizations and that sponsor them and bring them and try to make their lives better. Nevertheless, it's sad to see, to see them, to see a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and so forth, get it fitted, with prosthetics and so forth. Their lives are changed forever. Many of them who actually survived, and this is a double whammy, are orphans. So
That's
they
right.
either, and they now break down, there is a breakdown, I don't have the number, but people can look that up. They break it down as far as orphanage, those who lost one parent, like their father, or lost their mother, and several of them who lost both parents, so they actually have no one to take care of them except maybe uncles and friends and so forth. And their lives, they lost their parents, and at the same time they are amputees.
Yeah. And Jamal, we need to know that the destruction of the healthcare infrastructure continues full steam ahead. I mean, we don't have time to talk about it today, but every single day hospitals continue to be attacked, what's left of them, because there really are no functioning hospitals. So these children are being mortally wounded, injured, orphaned, and in ways not having any access whatsoever to any medical care. So the numbers are underrepresented, as we've said before, because even if they survive these brutal, catastrophic attacks, there's a large likelihood that they may perish or die from their wounds later on. So the situation remains grave, Jamal. And again, I want to just say how ridiculous it is. We're hearing this week that Trump and Netanyahu are talking about, oh, a peace deal in Gaza is close. It's rubbish.
And our last story, Jess, is that the Committee to Protect Journalists has documented that the Israeli authorities have arrested over 85 Palestinian journalists since October 7, 2023. Maybe
Right.
even the number is higher. And of course, it's a different number. We've talked about it, the number of journalists they've killed in Gaza.
Right.
And now this is the first time that Israel has arrested and opened an investigation against an Israeli journalist for expressing his opinion. And so the Israeli police arrested and detained Israel Frey on Wednesday, July 9th in Tel Aviv, after the state attorney's office opened a criminal investigation saying that he was inciting terrorism based on a social media post on X. And Frey is a known journalist. He reports on the Israeli occupation in the West Bank way before what happened in Gaza on several outlets, including Haaretz and Ynet. And now this is what happened. So after the news that 5 Israeli soldiers were killed by an explosive device in northern Gaza, Frey tweeted that, and I'm quoting here, "The world is a better place this morning without 5 young men who participated in one of the most horrific crimes against humanity." So that was his tweet. I don't know if the
And
tweet
now
is
he's
still
being
up
charged.
there.
Now he's being investigated for terrorism.
Then, listen, before that, on October 16th, 2023, Frey went into hiding after his home was attacked the previous day by a mob of far-right Israelis after he expressed solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza. So this is not his first rodeo. They tried to set his house on fire. They
Yeah.
tried to actually lynch him, take him out, and so he went into hiding. And now he put that tweet. I mean, that's his opinion. Not angered many Israelis, but certainly Israel claims to be that it has freedom of the press and so forth, and the only democracy in the Middle East. They yanked him out. Now he's arrested. I'm sure he's not going to face the same detention, be it time-wise, like Palestinian journalists. I don't know if he's going to be beaten and tortured like Palestinian journalists. Nevertheless, this is a first of its kind.
Yeah, it's the first of its kind. It won't be the last of its kind, Jamal. We're seeing vicious attacks, obviously, on all forms of journalism who seek to report what's happening in Palestine, especially in Gaza, West Bank, and Jerusalem. And now, even Israelis, Jewish Israelis, are being targeted because they speak to the truth and the reality of the genocide of what's happening there. It's a very tragic day for journalism globally right now, Jamal, and I can only see it getting worse.
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.